Hey everybody, I'm Marcus Hazelwood, and welcome to Clear Haze Exchange. I'm an energy engineer with over 15 years of experience in sustainability and energy efficiency consulting. Many find these topics a little complex, so I created Clear Haze Exchange to help provide clear, actionable insight. Clearing the haze, so to speak. We'll cover plenty of topics under the umbrella of energy efficiency and sustainability. Let's get into today's conversation. Welcome to another episode of Clear Haze Exchange. Today's guest, we have Dr. Eric Woodroof. He spent his career helping people and organizations save energy and money while making real impact on the planet. He's trained thousands of professionals around the world through the Certified Energy Manager program by the Association of Energy Engineers, and I'm proud to say I was one of them. Dr. Eric Woodroof was my instructor during my CEM certification course, and his teaching has played a big role in shaping my own journey in building optimization. He's a founder of Profitable Green Solutions, a speaker, author, and creator of several industry certifications. Eric is known for making energy efficiency practical, profitable, and easy to understand, whether he's working for a Fortune 500 company or mentoring the next generation of energy engineers and leaders. Welcome, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great, and it's great to be interviewed by someone who has taken the CEM and actually gets it. And I am just curious by what you said there. Like you said, it's changed your world. I'm going to ask you a question.
Absolutely.
How has this? How does the CEM helped you out?
Well, it's brought depth of understanding from an energy perspective. So there's the engineering side, then understanding how you associate that with cost and everything. It builds my confidence around entering into this world. The energy world is its own career, and it's helped me see that. So,
Well, that's good. That makes me feel good. I'm glad you're making great progress.
No, I think that the CM course has always been something I looked to take, but once I took it, that was when I realized, the value of it, because I still have my big book to refer back to calculations, quick calculations and stuff sitting behind my desk.
We're always editing that book. In fact, this is the book you're talking
Yeah.
about, and I was
Yep.
editing it this morning for
Yeah.
more. There's just so much going on in AI and exciting time that, that book will be good for you, but we're always trying to make the newer developments, some of it's timeless, but the new stuff is always changing, and
Yeah.
it's challenging to keep up with. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have it all marked up because I think that week I took my exam after after the training, so it's got all the tabs and references and sitting in there. So super
Right.
helpful.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, I am
So,
here for you. However I can answer questions, help, you've got me.
all right. Well, I guess to start out, what is one thing people often get wrong about energy savings or performance contracting?
Well, I'll say this. I think that, know, the energy situation, the energy industry is in a state of flux right now, in many ways, in a good direction. Energy is becoming more expensive, and people are actually following the money. And I'd say that following the money would be very effective for understanding energy project, particularly what you said about seeing the whole picture with your CEM training and how that impacted your career. In that it's becoming pretty cost effective. I mean, I have solar, talk about renewables for a second. I have solar panels. In a way, you could look at that as a performance contract because it's kind of an investment, then you gain back your savings over time. My own solar projects are making 15% return, which would be pretty competitive considering the risk is, is the sun going to come up tomorrow?
Yeah.
It's a pretty low risk
Yeah.
15% return. And I would say for performance contracts, I mean, that really solves the number one problem that has existed since I did my PhD 30 years ago. Is that, money is the upfront capital to get, projects done. Even my local town here did a performance contract for $5 million. The only reason they could do it, the only reason they did the performance contract, it was the only way they could get a guarantee to back up the bonds to get the approval to fix lights and fix other things that are in town. I mean, the roofs were leaking, and the performance contract solved the money problem. So I'd say follow the money, because either on the efficiency side, you're going to find good returns. On the renewable side, even 15%. And then on performance contracting, it may enable projects that never would have happened without that solution. So I think that's the big picture. Is this is not a bad thing. Should be a politically neutral thing.
Yeah.
This is a moving the rock forward, saving money, creating jobs.
Yeah.
Um, it should not be a political issue.
Yeah, and I remember you using that, example of you're putting solar in your house when I was, doing my course, with you, and you mentioned it, and it was a way to kind of think about how if I'm actually doing this myself and seeing how it affects my own wallet, I can vouch for it even better. I started to go the now I didn't get solar on the house at that time, but I started to go through the process, and it became more clear to me how it would affect my own wallet. So that was good.
Where are you located again? I forgot.
I'm in Ohio, Columbus,
Okay.
Ohio. Yeah,
So, I mean, the electric rates here are about 12 to 15 cents down here in Kentucky. And I'm saying that I was able to make it work in Kentucky at very low rates. This morning, I was on the phone with some people in Portland. They're only paying about 8 cents. So it might be difficult there, but almost everywhere else in the country, it's probably more expensive than 12 cents. And you probably can make it work in most places, unless, you live in a cloud, like it's always overcast or
yeah,
something. I live in a rainforest, I mean, practically a rainforest in Kentucky, and it's still working out. So, I
yeah,
always try to say, hey, if your rates are, some people in New York are paying 38 cents a kilowatt hour,
yeah,
you know, should
yeah,
work out, right?
easy. Yeah. So what sparked your interest in energy, and sustainability? Because really with that energy piece, it's sustainable. It kind of defines that next piece of sustaining. So what really sparked your interest in moving this direction?
I was looking for this book. I have a very small library, but I have this one book I've kept, because everything's digital, but I kept this one book for a while. I can't find it, but it was in college. I was a physics major, and I was kind of not exactly crystal clear on what I wanted to do. Physics is a good foundation. You can do a lot of things with that. And I took this class called Energy and the Environment, and they talked about the connection between like they talked about what messes up the environment. Well, population,
Yeah.
war, and next is energy consumption. And that was way back in the uh, I mean, early 1990s, like 1990 itself. And I took this class, UC Santa Barbara, and I said, okay, this is something that I can work on. I can feel good, because the more that I do to reduce energy consumption, the less pollution will be created, and that can make me feel good in my heart. And also, um, it's one of the few businesses, the more you do, the better it is for the environment. So, thumbs up there. I got all excited. My dad's a very successful, you could say, burn doctor. He invented a burn wound dressing, kind of like a Band-Aid for burn patients. It became the gold standard in that industry. And he sold his company, was at a point, I mean, he sold his company, went back. I mean, there's all kinds of stories there. But like at this point in his life, he had money, and were building a cabin in the woods up in Big Bear, California. And I was like, you got to put solar panels on this. And he's like, well, what's the payback? And at the time, this was like 19 and right around 1990, I
Okay.
think it was a little before then, he goes, well, the payback is like 35 years and the things only last 25 years, so I'm not going to do it. And I was heartbroken. But it taught me that the money is the answer. If you can solve the money, you can make this work. And so that really kind of, I would say, a defining moment where you decide, okay, I need to focus on this part of the problem. And since then, my whole career has pretty much been about how do we make it so it's a good financial return, and then does all these other things, the energy and the environment. But that's how I got into it. And in that book, there was an article by this professor at Berkeley. Why can't I think of his name? I had it I was thinking about him earlier today, but I've lost the name. But it was a very nicely written article about performance contracting. And performance contracting was the idea. Arthur Rosenfeld came up with this. He was writing about this idea of using the savings to pay for the project, because the money's the big problem. Starting the project, getting the capital. If you can solve that problem, you're halfway there. And so I read that article and I thought that is something I want to learn more about. Ended up finishing my physics degree at Santa Barbara, and then that kind of took some time off. But after that, I got back into it heavy and went up to Berkeley and started my grad school studies there, and then left Berkeley to go to Oklahoma State to work with Wayne Turner, who created the CEM program. And because I saw that it was really practical and they were developing solutions that worked in businesses, and we're talking about people that want a 3-year simple payback or a 33% return on investment. And so I went there and accumulated skills there. And so, but that passion, all of it came from technically, my dad. That one comment kind of shaped a lot of that activity. And yeah, kind of happy about that.
Yeah, yeah. And so the space that you've been in with the certified energy manager training, how did you use your studies to support that track in physics? How did those kind of
Well, well, to be fair, I want to be accurate. So physics was very scientific. I mean, we looked at cosmology and oceanography, and I did some work in there. But
okay.
once I left the undergrad bachelor program, I
Uh-huh.
never really ventured back into physics, right?
Okay.
I have the degree, but and I don't care to do quantum mechanics. But the applied science
Uh-huh.
of what they're doing at Oklahoma State and all of the industrial assessment centers and Tom Wenning and the Department of Energy and all those very practical oriented people is really an application of physics, and just working towards the energy efficiency or energy substitution. It's a fuel source substitution or others. Um, it kind of is based in physics, but I can't really call myself a physicist. Does that
Yeah.
help?
Yeah, no, it does, because the reason I asked that question is when I think of an environmental science degree and an engineering degree, I think about how did those relate. So for me, I went backwards, going into the industry in engineering, and then on the back end, getting my degree in environmental studies. And it's, of course, you still retain the skill set you learned in school, but it's always interesting to see where people end up, out of college. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what your experience was, I can validate that too, because my master's was in environmental science. It really was all about energy, but having to take some of those classes and learn about biodiversity and learn about absorption and how they clean up chemical messes, and that all has a value to it. Like
Right.
nature has a value. We don't value it, but it does have a dollar value. And I think it was about 10 years ago, I went to Paris and worked with the International Energy Agency on trying to quantify some of the ancillary impacts of energy production or savings. And of course, so we all, CEMs, we all work on the practical dollar savings on the utility bill.
Yeah.
But there's also non-utility bill benefits, like not having to buy offsets or reducing your maintenance budget. But this group in the IEA really went far and wrote a whole paper about, okay, if you reduce energy, you reduce pollution, and that reduces asthma, and that reduces people who are compromised, in urban environments or just heavily polluted environments. And that has a value. Avoiding hospital visits, avoiding extended stays in hospitals has a societal value,
Yeah.
particularly if those people don't have insurance and that's all being paid for by taxpayers. But of course, our world is more on the immediate tangible, but there's a whole nother, and it's much greater cost to society is the pollution aspect. So I think we have to do a better job of your education and bring in people that have this environmental understanding of it doesn't just stop at your site. It goes out into rivers. It goes out into, I mean, our town has a problem with leachate. They're trying to dump millions of dollars of leachate into Lake Cumberland.
Wow.
And, someone's saving money on their waste, but it's going to have societal impact. on either the fishing industry or the people who use the lake, and that will be spread out over time. It'll be hard to track, but some people, like people with your skills, we need that to be counted because it does happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. So you trained thousands of professionals. What's the biggest barrier that they face in implementing energy projects?
I would say my whole career has not really been successful in this one aspect. So yeah, we've done lots of projects and people in the class have done lots of projects, but the fact still remains. When I started my dissertation, it was like, okay, I'm going to tackle a big problem. What's a big problem? It's the money. And the upfront capital barrier was, I think, 41% of why projects wouldn't get going or get delayed, right? And that's kind of a problem because if you have a chance to save $1 million by doing a project, if you don't do it, you still spent $1 million. You just didn't have it in savings. You spent that money in the utility. And nothing against utilities, but they're happy to take that money. It's not really an investment; it's an expense. You're wasting energy. The utility is going to take your money, and you're never going to get that money back. Whereas if you'd invested in a project, you would get a return. Okay, but my point is, that's the point aside. The percentage was 41 in 1994, and I'm pretty sure the percentage is about the same today. So that still is the problem of upfront capital, and really, performance contracting is one of many solutions. It doesn't always end up perfect, and it's not like every person I know is a wonderful person to be around. Some performance contracts aren't done well, right? They're not set up well. The contract's bad, or people are, do bad things, nefarious things, whatever. And you can have one bad contract out of 10 that'll spoil the image of performance contracting. But if it was done well, it's a great solution to that upfront capital problem. And then it gets down to, well, how is it done well? And I was lucky to work on some best practice teams and things. And that's why we also developed that performance contracting certification to try to educate both parties on the critical things that can go wrong so that they write good contracts, have good communication, and have less likelihood of having a bad apple. One bad apple, one bad performance contract will get bad press and it'll kill, 10 or 20 other projects that probably would have been fine,
Yeah.
but just people would be afraid of it. And so that's the reason why we created the certification, is try to reduce the number of lawsuits, better educate. Like in my town, there's no one who'd ever done a performance contract on the city staff. So
Yeah.
for someone in their position, you might do one performance contract in your whole career, and you're trying to negotiate with an ESCO who does this every day. Well, the ESCO has a far big advantage in M&V statistics and all kinds of things. So the more you can educate that municipal person so they can at least have a reasonable conversation and negotiation, you get a better outcome. And but again, it's all about solving that lack of capital problem. So I think PC is a good, is an option.
Yeah. Yeah. And how would you make those complex strategies more understandable inside of a government organization or a small city?
Well, I think a lot of it can be language. When you start using big words, people get confused. And we just had the CEM annual update about a month ago, and the M&V world is kind of going under an evolution with AI, and the AI, they're using much more complex terms. And I'll just give you a few words. Like, I have notes on this because I had to write them down. They were new to me, but like counterfactual, that's probably known, but there are all these, was it a physical model, statistical model, all these other maybe newer or more complicated vocabulary words can make it challenging, right? So I think you just got to get back to really common sense language and performance contract writing. Hey, this is the savings we project according to these. And I would try to get it down to a few key considerations, like whether did your facility expand 50%? Did your facility encounter greater occupants or maybe longer operating hours? Some schools are now operating in the summer. Well, that would change the savings and, all that, or make it maybe you you have costs, but they're not as high as they would have been without the energy saving technology. There's all kinds of things like that, and you try to make it simpler is a good way to go. I think there is a lot going on in AI and particularly automating things, blockchain and others that uh, are new learning points, but have the value of making the easier on the operator, the person who's operating that school. Maybe instead of them having to look at a report and sift through a bunch of data, AI can say, hey, this motor is out of the 100 you have. This one is behaving weird because we're watching the amp draws or there's some other strange, thing. And based on the other data the AI can see, it could recommend and even send you an email like everything's looking good, but this one thing looks weird, the AI, I think it's this, and here's potential solutions. And if it's bad, here's the model numbers to go replace it, and maybe even get you quotes. And it could do all that and make it a lot easier. And I think that's happening in performance contracts also. I mean, performance contracts even been written on carbon now, where
Mm,
you could have, and this is not just AI, but an automated system that says, "Hey, right now I mean, I could literally look at my app on my phone, and I know it's sunny outside. I know everything we're doing right here is being powered by the sun right now.
mhm.
But if a cloud came over, it could make a decision. Well, do we fire up the battery and use the stored energy we already have? Do we, go to the grid? And having these kinds of things happen and making it, easier on the operator, is there's a lot of people are going to have great businesses developing those kinds of solutions too.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. You kind of talked about the different terms and new terms with the word sustainability. How do you see things shifting when you're trying to portray the ideas and the opportunities to clients around energy savings?
Well, unfortunately, our current government is not a real big fan of what I
Yes.
would call long-term thinking and sustainability. And for any of those senators, I challenge them, if you don't believe pollution's a thing, then go lock yourself in your garage, turn on your car, your gas internal and see how that works out. Like we have a limited space, we have a limited planet, limited atmosphere. To me, it's pretty clear cut. You can't just you treat it like an open sewer.
Yeah.
Now that I've said that, most of the stuff we do, we try to stay away from the politics. But I think, unfortunately, sustainability has kind of got that, politicization going on. And I go back to, I can think of analogies just on the fly here that if you want to think about sustainability, apply it to your own body, your own health, right? I mean, I'm 56 now. I'm getting older. I see ailments and things that I'm more concerned about as a 56-year-old than I was as a 26-year-old. So, kind of thinking about that, like there is a lifespan, and when you think about that, you become more concerned about pollution impacting you as a person. So, I think Al Gore, his new uh, tool, Climate Trace, they used to talk about carbon emissions, and that's great. That's all about showing you where the problem is. And I think that they've developed new AI software, satellite, and all this stuff. It's pretty amazing how accurate this is. But now they can show where pollution clouds are going, plumes, not just of CO2, but of like cancer causing stuff that if you knew your house is downwind and you're being kind of blanketed daily by this cancer causing stuff, you might actually care about the sustainability of your body if you've got that kind of threat. And I think that our world, our the good part of us as people needs to think a little longer term and think about how these pollution impacts can impact cities, impact economics, all these other things. Because if your city's kind of run down and dirty, and it neglects all this for a long time, you're going to have less companies wanting to move there, which is a direct economic, tax thing. But I would say the analogy that I've thought of before is like doing energy efficiency is kind of like going on a diet. Nobody wants to do that because diets are not fun. You have to have goals, you have to have activities and follow up. And generally, if you're relatively healthy or if you're able to get through your day, you don't have a lot of motivation. But as soon as you have like a heart attack, Now you care
Yeah.
and you'll go on this incredible diet of your life. Well,
Yeah.
I think, not to belabor this, I feel like a politician answering in 7-minute answers, but um, I want to give you this other point is that energy's like dieting. I think an CO2 based climate change threat is a lot harder to see on your daily body. I would say that's more like a cholesterol test
Mm.
where you have to go get your blood work done to even see the problem, right? And so I think, and we have all the measurements now for that. But I think that this plume stuff about seeing the cancer stuff, the bad stuff falling on you will really have a personal impact because it's direct, it's immediate, and it affects the person that they would actually care about sustainability, you know? So I wanted to bring all that back around. Does that help you out?
It does. That's really good. I like that concept. It's always an experience. And what I think about a brief story is my daughter, she's 5, and I gave her this car that I can control from a remote, and she takes off. And if she doesn't put her seatbelt on, it'll jerk because as soon as you let off a pedal, it'll jerk forward and she could bust her lip. So I told her, always put your seatbelt on. And she, would listen to me, but then sometimes she wouldn't. And then it wasn't until she had the experience herself. She stopped and busted her lip. And then, so ever since then, she's put her seatbelt on. She doesn't get in that thing without putting her seatbelt on. So I relate that to how these concepts and what you're saying is unfortunately a lot of people have to have that firsthand experience. And would you say that energy performance contracting kind of helps with that in terms of people being able to see the benefit strategies in energy would help, whether it's owners or leaders in organizations or leaders politically? What are the avenues to help them get that, in your opinion?
Well, I think your daughter's story is very applicable because people will do a lot to avoid a penalty, but they will do very little to get a reward. In a lot of keynotes I've given, you may have been a part of. I may have done this to your class. Take a population. It could be 1,000 people, could be 50 people. It's almost the results almost always the same. I say, hey, pretend this thing right here is $100. Okay, if you or $1,000, and I'll lay it down on the table at the front of the class, and have people line up in the back of the room just as an exercise. And I say,
Yeah.
okay, the first person who can get the $100 keeps it, and you win. You win the reward. Okay.
Mhm.
And I'll say, how many of you would want to play that game? And about 15% of the population will respond. Okay, that they would be willing to play to get the reward. And then if I turn it around and say the same thing and say, okay, this black pad, last person to touch it has to pay me $100. And if you don't play, you automatically lose. 80% of that class or, audience will take action to avoid the penalty. So a lot of times when we communicate about energy efficiency, we talk about it as savings. We really might want to consider talking about the penalty because the penalty, the pain, your daughter's busted lip in that example is a perfect, I mean, it just lines up with human nature. We will avoid the penalty to a greater degree, than going after some, reward. I mean, it's the same, it's the same kind of thing. So I think when we talk about it, instead of talking about savings, we should just say, we can continue to operate the way we are right now, and we'll continue to throw away that $1 million every single year. And our competitors will have a cost competitive advantage against us every single year because they are doing these projects. They're getting ahead, becoming more profit per share, earnings per share, profit per product, and we're being left behind. And I think that is true. There's no lying there. And I would never advocate anyone in our field to, exaggerate the truth. It's just, coming at it from a little different angle from the penalty side versus the saving side might be a good way to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it does. And I think about it myself and not only applying it to seeing that happen, but for myself, it's just human nature. Like you said, it's just we respond better that way. So you've worked across 6 continents. What trends or challenges are universal versus what you see in certain spaces? I'll add this little piece here. I have had conversations with people in the UK and different countries, and they point a lot to governance and penalties, like you said. But what would you say are the trends or challenges that are universal or otherwise?
That's a tougher one. I would start with saying there are many good people all around the world. Everywhere I've traveled, we've always met very nice people. There's good people doing good work everywhere. And I think it gets down to where you're at in your life, where you're at in your career. Humans are generally just a tiny bit lazy, right?
Yeah.
We all will. Um, it'd be much easier to kick back on the hammock than do the work, right? And if a government is got some regulation that is influencing you, you're more apt to do things. Or if competitive forces in your industry is making it so you have to do this or you lose,
Yeah.
market share. Those are good drivers. I think that one thing I would say that's pretty universal is utilities. They're pretty much everywhere. And they have the longer term view than maybe someone who's 25 years old renting an apartment or going to college or grad school. That person may not be in the right place in their lifetime to go ahead and put solar panels on their rental apartment. That's just, that's not going to work. But if the utility can make it, more uh, financially easy to do these things because the utility is thinking 50 or 100 years, when they plan out grids, they can really help this along, like geothermal heat pumps, for example. They cost twice as much. But if you do it, you save energy over a much longer period. And I think that in places where I've seen utilities take a very progressive approach, they really do benefit in the long term as well. I was talking to a gentleman from the West Coast this morning in Portland, and I could look at California too, all those places, it's amazing that, in Portland, you have energy that's about half the price of the average of the United States. And you compare that to New York, which is about twice the average of the United States. So let's just say New York, California might be on the order of 35 to 40 cents a kilowatt hour or more. Hawaii might be closer to 50. And Portland's here at like 8. And Kentucky is around 15. Um, it's interesting to see that even in those conditions, the people of Portland and Washington, and Oregon, they're really still doing these kinds of projects. And I find that's just kind of inspiring. But my daughter lives in London, England. I can tell you when we bought the flat there, there was all these disclosures, and one of the disclosures that I was watching was the energy performance scorecard of that building.
Hmm.
And I remember it was a D plus. And so I'm thinking in my head, well, we can buy this flat, but I know that because of the London regulations and England's commitment to climate change and being more energy efficient, that D plus is either going to be fined heavily, or the owner of that building, okay, there's 20 some units in that building, is going to have to upgrade their boiler or face a lot of fines and
Yeah.
penalties, just like New York City and some other places. And
Yep.
so that kind of external governmental or utility influence will really make it so that the property owner has to do something,
Yeah.
either from fines or from a utility incentive standpoint, making it so it's more palatable.
Mm.
I think those things are true in a lot of places that I've been. I've been to the Middle East, I've been to Asia. Sometimes local governments, Taiwan comes to mind, that they'll subsidize an industry because they want to keep that industry alive in their town. So they'll give them very, very low energy rates and things like that.
Mm.
But in a similar manner, governments can kind of tip the scales and push us in a longer term thinking, more longer term prosperity versus a short term thing. I mean, I could go sell my house and sell my cars and all that stuff and show a big windfall like our current president might want to do and make everything look great, but then it would have nothing next year, And so I think the utilities have that more longer term view. I think, government agencies in the right thinking correctly should be thinking longer term. And I think that would be my best answer to your question. And I think even that was not a great answer, but hopefully that helps you out.
You're right. It has to be something pushing someone to do something because as much as, the truth is there, we're a bit lazy when it comes to things that we don't want to, do. How is it going to influence us? It better be some money influence in many cases. So, yeah, that makes sense. So, as we wrap it up here, what advice would you give someone entering into the energy field today, given all these changes and the fluctuation? How would you direct them?
Well, I think that, education sometimes gets a good rap, sometimes gets a bad rap, but I think being educated in is a good idea. The more you can learn, the more you can understand about the markets that you're interested in, and particularly the AI stuff is,
Yeah,
if right now I would be doing lessons as much as I could to learn about some of those things. Fascinating things. It'll probably be different in 3 months from now, but understanding that and being a part of that, literally a wave that's coming, will be a good career move. Much in the way that you got that environmental science degree, um, that will serve you in one way or another for the rest of your life. And I've also noticed my wife has a medical clinic, and I've been fortunate to hire and fire people as part of that process, and CFO, janitor, and my other roles, right? But I would say that one thing I would say is another universal truth is that the people who have an education, the people that got those degrees or certifications in radiology or whatever, they tend to have a little more grit. They tend to have a little more staying power to power through tough times in a business or just in general in life. And we have much less turnover from those kinds of people than we have people without an education, people with just a high school education or zero trade training, just basic entry level stuff. They tend to turn over much quicker. And I think my theory is that the people who've done something and stuck it out, they have more grit. And I think it's also true that if you do what you like or you enjoy it and you're good at it, you're probably going to do better in your career. So my best advice to someone is, and this is, I've heard some Jeff Bezos and people saying this is bad advice, do your passion, whatever. I still believe that. Do what you like, find something you can do that's valuable and something that you do very well. And I think there's lots of choices there in energy. You can do renewables, all that's expanding, AI, battery storage. I could go on. There'll always be different areas that are up and down, but find one you like, do lots of it, learn everything you can, be the best in the world at that. And the money will work out fine. Your job will work out fine, whether in your career, your own business, whatever. But if you like it, you'll have more grit and you'll probably have more fun, you know?
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. I agree. I could say I lived that advice because I had to find what I like to do, what I was good at, in order to navigate my career. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that sentiment. Last thought I would ask from you is I know you work with a lot of leaders. What would you say is the biggest challenge in maintaining momentum and energy efficiency and continuing to improve it? Because there's a lot of goals around carbon neutral by 2050, all these aggressive climate action goals. But how would you say leadership should drive those aggressive goals?
Well, I'd like to say lead by example.
Yeah.
That's what I think needs to be done. I think, you know, like you said, carbon neutrality. I think California's on track to meet their carbon goals. And I can speak for this house.
Yeah.
This house is carbon neutral
Nice.
until I bought that second electric car. Okay. And now I've got to figure that out, but
You're
I
offset.
will,
Yeah.
but it wasn't impossible. I will say that there's some, exceptions. Maybe we have a backup natural gas generator and maybe we have a fireplace on once in a while, but I can offset that. I can find good ways to do good that's greater than that emission source. But it wasn't financially impossible to do that. I mean, and like I said, I'm making 15% return, so it really wasn't even that big of a deal. Again, I'm not a 25-year-old college student, but if I can do it at my house, why can't we do it, you know, as a society?
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible. It's been done. And I'd like to see more leadership that way. I think California is doing a great job of leading as far as I think they're on 260 days of this year already that they've had, I think, more than 6 hours of the whole grid being powered by the sun, something on that neighborhood. Maybe it's 4 hours. I might not be perfect, but 260 days.
Wow.
That's a lot of the potential of where we're at, and of all the. We're on October 15th today. It's on that order of magnitude. A lot of days they've been able to be, running the grid off renewables for a significant part of the day. And then if they have excess renewables, they're sticking that in battery storage and shaving down their evening peak, which now is from 4 to 8 p.m. I think that's a great example. Whenever I have people who challenge like, oh, it's not feasible, it's not possible, it's not economic. Well, look at the data. They're leading by example, and that's what we need more of, is more people, going after it. Because I guarantee you, it's not just this country that's in this fight and this race. Other countries are doing this too. In China, the last year, 2000, I think either last year, 2024, or the first 6 months of this year, 50% of the cars sold were electric vehicles. And an electric vehicle emits about 1/3 as much as an internal combustion engine. When you count even if you took a coal-fired power plant and powered your, charged up your electric vehicle, that's going to be, 1/3 of the emissions of doing it with a gasoline-fueled car.
Yeah.
Okay, now EVs do cost more and all that stuff, and then we got batteries and who knows what the waste. There's still some issues there, but the fact of the matter is, 50% of the vehicles sold in China last year were EVs. They are ahead of that race. And I think we might consider leaders not only leading by example, but trying to win the race. Because who wins the race, or who keeps on top of the technology, whether it's a space race or energy efficiency race, learns a lot and also gets to, patent and sell that technology, and it helps the economy down the road. And I would like to see more long-term thinking like that.
That's great. That's good. Well, Eric Woodroof, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your depth of knowledge and experiences. Certainly appreciate it, and I hope the audience can appreciate it as well. But we were able to clear the haze around a lot of topics, especially energy and how we can use energy better, how we can lead by example, how we can use personal experiences to advance our ambition around energy efficiency. Again, appreciate you coming on the show and sharing, and we'll see everyone next time on the next show.
Thank you for letting me be here, and great job. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Clear Haze Exchange. New episodes drop every 2 weeks. You can catch Clear Haze Exchange on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and more. Let's clear the haze about sustainability and energy efficiency together. Subscribe now and join the conversation.